Wargaming timers and powerful units. Who doesn't like a Death Star? Who doesn't like an elite unit? We're exploring this idea, Wargaming 101. If it involves dice, although some games involve cards, if it involves dice, there are certain universal wargaming laws independent of the system that you are running. And I'm pushing up to my channel here under the Wargaming Tactica playlist just a couple of ideas, some questions to ponder, some questions to consider, to inject and build that checklist into your own wargaming system. Warhammer 40,000, Battletech, X-Wing miniatures, historicals, modern, whatever you're playing, to give you a little advantage, to explore these ideas of learning curves and how can we cut that learning curve down. It's going to take you 10 games to realize this Tactica, 10 games to be like, yes, this is it. This is what I understand. Can you listen to this vlog and cut that down to 8 games? So how can we utilize that? So the first thing is to realize that most games, with the exception of historicals are a little bit different, like World War II, Napoleonics, Ancients. You have some sort of point structure. You have some sort of army construction, but often what you'll see is things will be a little bit unbalanced, or they might not be equal in terms of what you can take in tech levels, because you're literally trying to live history. An example, Chain of Command, World War II, fantastic game. The only reason I play late war Germans is simply because I love the tanks. I want to play big, powerful, lots and lots of tanks. And, the KV, the Russians got some fun tanks. The Americans have some fun tanks, but no one does tanks like the Germans. I really couldn't care about the rest of it. The tanks. When I play early war Germans, I've got a lot of infantry, but my tanks are like, Panzer IIs, Panzer IIIs. So I have that understanding that things shift. And in playing late war Germans, I'm vastly outnumbered. Fortress Europe, the Americans are invading. It's a different play style. I really can't complain about it being fair or not, because we're looking to evolve that perspective. On the opposite side, playing Ancients, DBA playing Romans. And we'll go in, I'll play kind of Romans, focusing on Hadrian's Wall and kind of pushing up into Germania. I've got a vastly different tech level and vastly different organization based on that time period. So putting historicals aside for a moment, because this Tactica doesn't quite work, what a lot of us play is you have some sort of point level. Power points, squadron points, battle value, whatever that currency is going to be. And the idea is our armies might be vastly different. They might have completely different units with different abilities, but they have a value, and we agree ahead of time, like Battletech. How many battle value points do you want to play? So the idea is we have two vastly different forces, but in theory, they're close. I mean, nothing is ever 100% fair, especially in some war games that are very, very big. There is going to be this kind of back and forth. But the idea is we're as close to equal as it's going to be based on the rule set, based on the system at the start of the game. That's kind of the narrative. That's kind of the setup. And I'm already thinking about like lots of big tanks. Understanding that every turn that passes in the game, so you've taken out your toys, you've set it up, you're doing first turn, it's your turn to go. As the game advances, whether it's called turns or rounds, some games are fixed, play 6 rounds. Some games are open-ended. You play until a certain victory condition is met. So it could be fixed length or revolving length. But regardless, every single turn, your army is going to get weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. You are going to be losing units. You're going to be losing models. You're going to be losing your power points, battle value, currency every turn. You might lose a lot. You might lose a little. You might make some great tactical choices and don't lose as much. You might take a gamble, or your opponent gets lucky. They're a great tabletop general. You lose more, but you're going to lose something every single turn. What this means is the capability of your army to damage your opponent and fulfill mission parameters. Fulfill mission parameters. Almost a tongue twister there. Is getting weaker every turn. This leads us to Wargaming Momentum. As you deploy down your models in the deployment zone, the whole point of deployment is to take into account terrain and mission parameters in the tabletop and literally bust out of there with massive momentum. Massive, not jerk mode on, but really aggressive, fast, and committed with your playstyle, because you can affect the most at the beginning of the game. So you get weaker and weaker and weaker. Being bold or making that final play at the end is usually a sign of desperation, or a lot of other things have gone wrong. You want to be aggressive and dominate at the beginning, because that's where you have the chance to inflict the most damage and shift the momentum more on your side, or based on the dice, based on tactics, based on discovery, you can at least absorb some damage, model mass, and still be able to play the game. So think about your play style. I mean, sometimes my play style is like bolt, pistol, and chainsword. I charge everything. But think about your play style and think, how can I be more decisive at the beginning? How can I capture that momentum? And some of us might play a little more conservatively than others. You could play defensive. You could play conservative. You could play good tactica, but still really commit and push that. Every turn you get weaker and weaker. So now here's the duality. This is something to consider. And I don't have the exact answer for this because, again, I don't know the system that we're talking about. The answer for X-Wing miniatures would be vastly different than, say, Battletech. But there's this idea, in theory, if I take an Atlas, which is a 100-ton, superly powerful mech in Battletech, it's well over 1,000 battle value, a very powerful piece. Big guns, missiles, lasers, tons and tons of armor. I mean, a fearsome machine. Every system has really powerful weapons and units. You're paying the points for that. This is the duality. If you decide to use those, this is the paradox. You want to use those at the beginning of the turn. I don't want these powerful units hanging back, because that's unused battle value or points, currency. That every turn is not doing something. I need it to be out there blowing stuff up, killing stuff, removing models, even if it's taking damage. Because I paid so many points for it, if it sits idle, so if I sit back with my Atlas and I wait turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, and now I move out, those are multiple turns that I haven't been aggressive with it and I haven't been earning battle value. It needs to be earning turn 1, right? Always be closing, always be earning. I mean, that's just like life rules 101, translates down to the tabletop. But here's the paradox. Here's the real paradox. At the end of the game, and then I'll offer kind of a suggestion, a consideration. At the end of the game, these Kingslayer models, they become so powerful, even more powerful, because going back to this analogy of the Atlas, you have stuff to stop it at the beginning of the game because you've got your whole entire army. And you might take it out, you might destroy it. It might cost you a lot to do that. I'm going to inflict a lot of return damage, but you have the tools, the tech, the points, the models to do it. Think about a close game. Yes, some games are completely one-sided and you get slaughtered. You always play to the end, though, for honor. But for many of us, the game is neck and neck. You know, we're at turn 6, and I've got like 2 units left on the table, and I got like 2 guys in the building with a lot of shock. They're hanging on. I've got 1 tank left, but it's taken some damage. There's physically not that much left on the table. I don't have the volume of dice. I don't have the momentum to push. Well, at that point, if a Panther tank shows up, or if this Atlas shows up, I have nothing to stop it. So the irony being, at the end game, if you have a really powerful unit, it's literally going to stomp face all over everything. But it goes back to the first question then. If I take that Atlas Battletech example and I park it till the end of the game, it costs a lot of points to get this thing on the table. Those are points just parking and sitting there. So now we get into crunching the numbers and the meta, where, you know, depending on your play style, you might do multiple small unit and hordes. You might have a mix. You could go all elite. But we look and say, the really, really powerful units, we're going to make them be aggressive. But then, based on the size of the game, can I carve off some points and pick a unit that will be powerful enough at the end of the game. Because remember, if you're looking at a powerful unit and you're going to spend some points and be a little bit more defensive and hang back till mid or end game, I don't need the most powerful unit in the game. Because at that point, the battle value of my opponent is going to be much, much lower, so small. So what you see is you can look and say, well, here's units that they're not the most powerful in the game, but they're maybe mid-tier. But if I bring them in at the end, that mid-tier gets bumped up tremendously. Gets bumped up massively. Because Fritz has got like a half-blown-up tank and a mobilized tank. He's got a machine gun team. They're almost out of ammo. He's got a couple of guys hanging out in that building. That's all this guy has left. And, now I'm going to roll up with that Sherman. Not the best tank in the game, but solid enough. None of this Fury type stuff. I'm not going to be able to stop that Sherman. There's no way I can do it. Where compared to the beginning of the game, that Sherman tank versus my 2 Tigers, like, I'll roll the dice, but we know what's going to happen. I'm just going to smoke you. And even if that doesn't, I've got enough packs and Panzerfausts and other things, I'm just going to blow you off the table. So it's not a powerful unit at the beginning of the game, but it shifts at the end of the game. And I know I've been talking with some systems as examples, but what can you look towards your own games? I mean, I tend not to talk about X-Wing miniatures as much. That's something I want to talk more about. I view X-Wing miniatures as very, very competitive. For the most part, I consider myself a narrative player. This is kind of heresy here. I like Star Wars, but I'm not. It's not like BattleTech or 40K where I'm wedded to the mythology and the narrative. I'll break canon. I'll break kind of lists and stuff. So there's a whole tier of ships that you can fly that literally I'm looking for agility and maneuverability to kind of hang out, and then as we're moving towards the end of the tournament time, suddenly bust out and just blow you off the table. And they're not really powerful beginning game ships. They're mid-tier, but when you've got 2 ships left on the table and they've got no shields left and their hull is shot up and you've blown through some of your fixed munitions, then all of a sudden they really shine. So there's advantages to take, there's advantages to use and push with these general Wargaming Tactics 101. How can you find them? How can you use them? And together, how can we cut down that learning curve?